29-year-old shop owner Michel van de Velde had vanished from the town center. For 18 agonizing days, there was no word on where she was, leaving her family completely in the dark. This all went down in the quiet Dutch town of Dijk Flanders, in Zeeland, a community of only about 4,500 people. But what truly stunned everyone was that, when the police named their prime suspect, nobody could believe it, not until the evidence became impossible to ignore. It brought up a deeply unsettling question. How well do you truly know the people around you? On Monday, December 14, 2020, Michelle visited her grandmother, which would turn out to be the last time her family ever saw her. She had spoken with her mother, Miranda, that same day. The very next morning, as Miranda was heading home from her sewing workshop, she got a feeling that something was terribly wrong. Michelle lived with her mother in Osborne, and they'd had a quick chat about the COVID-19 pandemic and the new lockdown that was just announced the night before. They also talked about how it was going to affect their business. That was the very last time her mother would ever hear Michelle's voice. Later that evening, Miranda got a text message from Shell, but right away, something felt off. Shell never texted, she was always on WhatsApp. On top of that, the message just didn't sound like her daughter at all. The way it was written was just weird, and totally unlike Michelle. The text said that Shell was taking a friend on a short trip, a claim that immediately set off alarm bells for Miranda. This was happening just days before Christmas, right when her shop was swamped with orders. Why leave now? And where could she have possibly gone? And which friend was she supposedly with? That very night, Miranda started calling Michelle's closest friends, but not a single one of them knew where she was. Weirder still, they had all gotten the exact same strange text message. When Miranda tried to reach Michelle directly, her calls went unanswered, so she headed to her daughter's house. There, she found even more disturbing signs. Harvey, Michelle's beloved cat, had been left all alone with no food or water. There wasn't a single packed bag in sight, and all her clothes were still hanging neatly in the closet. Michelle's brother started digging through her Facebook, looking for any clues, maybe a new friend, or some mention of a trip. But just like at her house, her online presence revealed nothing out of the ordinary. Panicked, Miranda went to the police the very next day to report her daughter missing. Initially, the police didn't seem to take it seriously, since Michelle was an adult, and had only been gone for a short while, but her family was adamant that something was terribly wrong. They insisted Michelle would never send a standard text message, abandon her cat without food and water, or just take off without packing a single thing. They explained that the story in the text just didn't add up. For several critical days, the police did next to nothing. It wasn't until Christmas Day that they finally opened an official investigation. In the meantime, Michelle's family took matters into their own hands. Their first stop was to see Sandra Helman, a 44-year-old Belgian woman who was one of Michelle's close friends. Just back in May of 2020, Sandra had opened a spiritual shop called the Spiritual Little House Lotus, which was located right next door to Michelle's sewing business. The two women had become very close, talking every day and supporting each other as neighboring business owners. When Michelle's family walked into the shop, they were hit with the familiar smell of sweet incense. The place was filled with books and various items tied to black magic. When Sandra came out to greet them, she seemed just as worried as they were. Just like all of Michelle's other friends, she claimed she had no idea where Michelle could be, and said she shared their concern. She even offered to help with the search. Over the next few weeks, Sandra was very active on social media, posting updates about Michelle's case and pleading with the public for any help in finding her. Sandra also took part in several search parties that the community organized throughout the area. By December 23rd, the police finally began asking the public for help. Information about Michelle's disappearance was sent out to police stations all across the Netherlands, and her name was officially entered into the National Missing Persons Database. But even with all that, the case failed to gain any real traction, until authorities really got involved on January 1st of the new year. In the meantime, Michelle's family continued to push forward, blasting the case all over social media and local websites, trying to reach anyone and everyone they could. One of their posts. The case soon captivated people nationwide, far beyond their small town. With public pressure mounting, local police and investigators were forced to show they were treating the disappearance with the urgency it deserved. Before long, both the family and the authorities came to the same conclusion. Michelle hadn't just walked away. That bizarre text message was a glaring red flag pointing straight to foul play. And as detectives dug deeper, a shocking story began to surface, centered around her best friend, Sandra, and Sandra's husband, Felix. Michelle, who went by Shell, was apparently caught in a complicated love triangle. This wasn't just a rumor. Several of her friends confirmed it to the police, explaining that Sandra and Shell were incredibly close. As their friendship deepened, both women acknowledged their attraction to men and women. Shell had been in relationships with women before, and Sandra wanted to explore that part of her own identity with Shell. She even proposed that her husband, Felix, join them for their first intimate encounter. This unusual arrangement led to the three of them forming a relationship in late November of 2020. But just a few weeks in, the dynamic took a sharp turn. Felix and Shell started developing genuine feelings for each other and wanted to pursue a relationship on their own. Felix then broke the news to Sandra that he wanted to end their marriage. This revelation immediately put Felix on the police's radar. He lived with his family in the nearby village of Ardenburg, along with Sandra and their 6 kids. During questioning, Felix confirmed he'd also received strange texts from Shell right around the time she vanished. In fact, he showed them that on the morning of December 14th at 7 a.m., Shell had sent him loving messages. Felix told them they had plans to see each other later that day, and that evening, they drove to Blankenberg together to pick up his kids from daycare. According to Felix, that was the last time he ever saw her alive. The next morning, they were back to exchanging sweet messages and making promises over WhatsApp. But by 6:29 p.m. that same evening, everything changed in an instant. Felix got a standard text message, not a WhatsApp, that started with, "Hey honey, did you get my message? I'm having issues with WhatsApp because the Wi-Fi is out." But then, the tone shifted dramatically. The very next text read, "I can't do this. I'm sorry. I have to end things. It's been fun, but I'd rather get my life back. Somewhere else." Felix was completely blindsided. In another text, Michelle claimed she was in Brida with a friend, adding, "I don't know when I'll be back. In about a month, I'm heading to Indonesia with a friend." Felix struggled to process the messages, but ultimately decided to respect her wishes and give her some space. Then, on December 16th, at 3:51 p.m., he received one last text. "I'll be okay. Don't worry. This might be my last message. I'm getting a new SIM card soon." And after that, nothing. Felix told police he knew right away that something was terribly wrong. These messages just didn't sound like Shell. He then opened up about Sandra, his wife, and the mother of his children. "Sandra and I had a huge fight. We used to be so good together, but things have been really rough lately. Sandra's not easy to deal with. She always plays the victim and leaves me to raise the kids all on my own," he claimed. He added that this seemed to be exactly what Sandra wanted all along. The family had only moved to Ardenburg a year before. Sandra had dreams of opening a spiritual shop in the Netherlands, selling sacred items, while friends and family desperately continued their own daily searches. On Tuesday, February 9th, the official investigation team executed a series of search warrants. One at Shell's workshop, another at Sandra's spiritual shop, and a third at the home Sandra shared with her husband and kids. Sandra didn't put up a fight when police searched her store, which was called the Spiritual Little House Lotus, but the search came up empty. But there was one major detail that just didn't add up. Sandra insisted, over and over, that the last time she saw Shell was on the morning of December 14th. However, a photo that authorities recovered from her phone, one she had deleted, told a completely different story. The picture was taken on Tuesday. The photo, time-stamped December 15th, at precisely 10:01 p.m., captured Shell inside Sandra's shop, right in the kitchen, keying in the code to unlock her phone. If Sandra was telling the truth about the last time she saw Shell, this picture completely contradicted her story. This could be the key to why those texts supposedly from Shell felt so off, and the mounting inconsistencies were raising major red flags for investigators. But if Sandra was the culprit, why would she snap a photo that pointed the finger right at herself? The pieces just weren't fitting together. Authorities moved in and arrested her just as she was getting ready to leave for a family vacation. And during the entire arrest, Sandra adamantly claimed she had nothing to do with Shell's disappearance. But what police found next was far more sinister. That very evening, they located a suspicious blood stain on the carpet. Tucked under one of the legs of a round table, forensic analysis confirmed the blood belonged to Shell, and the Netherlands Forensic Institute found even more traces on Sandra's own shoes. And the damning evidence kept piling up when police got a call from Sandra's husband, Felix. Felix, who was at a vacation rental with their kids, shared something deeply unsettling. Their 13-year-old son remembered something from a few weeks prior. He recalled his mother asking for his help during a heavy snowstorm to move a large, heavy package from their garage into the family's Peugeot, and he specifically mentioned it had a terrible smell, emanating from the trash bags it was wrapped in. Police immediately set up a formal interview with the boy in a forensic studio designed to be comfortable for children. In that interview, he stuck to his story and added a chilling detail. His mother had later enlisted him and a friend to help move that very same package once more. This time, they moved it from her shop into the car. With this new timeline, investigators immediately pulled the GPS data from Sandra's Peugeot to see if the stories lined up. The question was, did the GPS show any unusual movements or stops in strange, remote places? The data screamed yes, leading police directly to a drainage canal on Canalweg. The location was just outside the town of Sluis, close to the Belgian border. On the morning of February 16th, the National Underwater Search Team was called in. They launched a massive search of the canal and surrounding area. And eventually, hidden in the brush, they found a trash bag containing the first of Michel van de Velde's remains. Over the next few weeks, subsequent searches of the area allowed police to recover her entire body, which had been separated into 9 distinct pieces. A medical examiner's review on February 20th confirmed the grim details. Forensics determined that Michel had been strangled, and the dismemberment occurred after she was already dead. The tools used were likely an electric saw and an axe. Curiously, the timeline suggested her remains were placed in the water long after she first disappeared, which raised the critical question of where they had been stored in the interim. Eventually, Michel's phone was also found, recovered from under a nearby bridge. Even after being underwater for about 10 months, experts at the Netherlands Forensic Institute miraculously managed to extract crucial data from the device. Investigators interrogated Sandra 4 times over the next week, but she stayed mostly silent, denying everything. Standing at just 5'3", Sandra was a small woman with a slight build. She was also at least 44 pounds lighter than Michel, though they were nearly the same height. Her speech was incredibly deliberate, as if she was mentally rehearsing every word up to 10 times before saying it aloud. During interrogations, she would often sit completely still, for 2 or 3 minutes at a time, making investigators wonder if she was even registering what they were asking. She offered no real response until February 16th, during her 5th interrogation, when authorities finally laid out all the evidence they had against her. In response, she provided a handwritten statement, which was described as bizarre and mostly fictional. In her account, Sandra admitted to the love triangle but denied it was the motive for the crime. Sandra maintained her innocence, insisting she hadn't done anything wrong. She did confess, however, that the affair between Michel and her husband had left her feeling completely betrayed. In fact, her animosity was clear. She had saved Michel's contact in her phone under the name Bitch. She claimed this was just her being protective, driven by a desire to keep her husband from ever being with another woman, but denied any intention of harming Michel, claiming her only goal was to keep Michel safe from Felix. Sandra proceeded to paint Felix as a chronic liar and a master manipulator. She claimed she had warned Michel that Felix would likely try to trap her with a child, using it as a tool for control, a tactic he had allegedly used against Sandra years before. Sandra alleged a history of abuse at Felix's hands, insisting her sole motive was to protect Michel from suffering the same fate. While she conceded that Michel was gone, she adamantly denied having any part in her death. She urged anyone seeking the whole truth to question Felix directly. Yet, tellingly, she refused to even speak his name during the interviews. Sandra's implication was clear. He was the one behind everything. She described getting a disturbing shopping list from Felix that called for garbage bags, tape, a hand axe, a reciprocating saw, and an electric handsaw. She claimed Felix sent her to a hardware store in Bruges to acquire these items, and later ordered her to dispose of Michel's body. Investigators dug deep into Felix's potential involvement, but found absolutely no evidence to support Sandra's story. While it was confirmed that Sandra had visited the hardware store and bought every single item on the list, down to a tree-shaped air freshener seen hanging from her car's mirror, there was nothing to indicate Felix had instructed her to do so. In fact, Felix was nowhere near the area on the day Michel vanished. He was at work in Belgium all day. His alibi was rock solid, corroborated by phone records, GPS data, and his employer's timesheets. Investigators also scrutinized the text messages exchanged between Felix and Michel, which depicted a man who seemed deeply in love, with neither a motive nor the opportunity to commit the crime. Sandra then refused to cooperate any further, and her claims against Felix were dismissed as pure fabrication. She withdrew from the questioning process entirely, telling the police she would remain silent until the investigation was complete. Her silence held for months on end, but it wasn't permanent. On April 14, 2022, nearly a year and a half after Michelle disappeared, Sandra finally broke and revealed her version of what happened. She framed it as a tragic accident, even as she admitted she was the one solely responsible for Michelle's death. According to her story, on the morning of December 15, 2020, a discussion in her shop's kitchen about the love triangle spiraled into a heated argument. The verbal fight turned physical, escalating into a shoving match. Sandra claimed that Michelle fell and struck her head on a heater. Seeing Michelle bleeding and struggling for air, Sandra said she panicked. Instead of calling for help, she admitted to putting her hands around Michelle's throat, terrified she was about to lose everything. She then moved Michelle's body, either unconscious or by then deceased, into the store's changing room, hiding it under boxes and burning large quantities of incense to mask any smell. It's a chilling thought that Michelle's body remained in that store, even when her family visited days later, frantic with worry. Sandra spoke calmly to Michelle's mother and brother, all the while knowing Michelle's body was concealed behind a curtain, just a few feet away. She confessed that she had already planned to dispose of the body right after that visit. Sandra admitted she initially tried to move Michelle's body in one piece, but found she couldn't. She then drove to a hardware store, bought an axe and a handsaw, returned to her shop, and dismembered Michelle's body into 9 parts. Each piece was put into a trash bag, which she then transported and dumped in a drainage ditch. It would be another full month before the remains were discovered. She also used Michelle's phone to send out fake messages to her family and friends, creating the illusion that Michelle had just walked away. Sandra even participated in the search parties, playing the part of a concerned friend while hiding the horrific truth. Investigators, however, were not buying her story. They flatly rejected the claim that Michelle's death was accidental or simply caused by a fall. Forensic evidence told a much darker story. Michelle had been struck in the eye with a blunt object, rendering her defenseless. It's believed that Sandra then tied her to a chair with a cloth, likely around 10 a.m. At some point after that, she strangled Michelle, ending her life. A witness who was in Sandra's shop on December 15th, the very day of the murder, eventually came forward, blowing a huge hole in Sandra's story. This customer had a gut feeling that Sandra had killed someone and was headed for prison. They told investigators they heard groaning sounds coming from the back of the shop during their visit. According to the witness, Sandra excused herself for a moment, and when she returned a minute or two later, the moaning had gone silent. This chilling detail suggested Michelle was likely still alive at that point, injured and held captive in the store, meaning Sandra made the cold, calculated decision to end her friend's life. But that raised a crucial question. How did Sandra get into Michelle's phone to send those fake text messages? The answer was found in a photo recovered from Sandra's own phone. She had secretly taken a picture of Michelle typing in her passcode sometime before the murder, giving her the key to send messages that fooled everyone, including Michelle's best friends, Felix and Miranda. In November of 2022, a court found Sandra Hellman guilty of murdering her friend, Michelle. The judge handed down a sentence of 18 years in prison, just as the prosecution had requested. She was also ordered to pay nearly 200,000 euros in damages to Michelle's grieving family. The court condemned Sandra for her callous treatment of the body, pointing out that the family was only able to say their final goodbyes to a lock of hair and Michelle's right arm. Despite the horrific details, the family felt a sense of relief with the verdict. Michelle's brother, Geoffrey van de Velde, stated he was satisfied the court had officially recognized the crime as murder. Michelle's mother, Miranda, described her feelings as torn, but ultimately relieved. Sandra made one last attempt at an appeal to the Dutch Supreme Court, but on February 19, 2025, the court shut it down, making her punishment final. To this day, Sandra insists that Michelle's death was just an accident, arguing she deserves a lesser sentence for manslaughter, instead of premeditated murder. She claims that everything went black and admits she still can't comprehend why she did it. But the truth of her actions is undeniable. While Michelle's family and friends were frantically searching for her, Sandra was playing the part of a worried friend, all while Michelle's body was lying just feet away in her shop's changing room. She looked Miranda and Geoffrey straight in the eye, gave them hugs, and pretended to share their pain. But investigators are convinced it was pure jealousy that ultimately drove her to kill. If you found this case as compelling as we did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We drop new crime case videos every single night. Until the next case, stay sharp and stay vigilant.